we go. Okay, well, lovely to see so many of you on here this morning. Thank you for making the time on a Friday. I know a lot of people like to have that as their down day or their work from home day. So it's lovely to have you here. Um, Bianca, should we do a little intro? Should we tell people what ideally what today's about and what
Yeah,
the podcast is
absolutely.
all about?
Yeah. So as Sophie said, just really exciting to have you all on and just holding this space for you this morning, really, so we can share a little bit about the hormones on the Blink team and Sophie, the incredible powerhouse that's put this all together. Because really, I'm just the one that comes in, Sophie, and just does the talking and sits there and smiles. But for you to put this all together, I think we should all just give Sophie a virtual cheer because it's just quite incredible. But let's share with them what it's about for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we wanted to hold this session really to let you know about we've launched the podcast, which was launched on Wednesday. And we'll share the links to that after today if you haven't had a chance to watch it already. But we thought as part of that, wouldn't it be nice to bring kind of the Hormones on the Blink team together and share some insights with you. So whether you're actually an individual that is wants to know more about hormone health and well-being and perimenopause and menopause, or whether actually you work, in a workplace where you would like to perhaps bring in more aspects of awareness and help to kind of make it more, let's say, of an equal playing field, more equality in the workplace in terms of having in mind what people might be going through and helping to support them in the workplace. Well, we hope that there'll be some things that you can take away from today. So we've got people sharing a bit about their personal experiences, the support that would have helped them or did help them. And also we've got our experts here. So we've got Dr. Katie Hodgkinson, who's our kind of hormone health and wellbeing medical expert. You give everyone a wave, Katie.
Hello.
And we've also got Laura Bowyer, who is our kind of in-house employment law specialist as well. So we're going to be hearing from Laura as well. I don't know if you want to give everyone a wave and a good morning.
Morning, everyone.
There we go. There she is. So if you would like to get involved, if you want to ask any questions in the chat, then please do that. I think before we get started, what we'd really like to do is kind of share some of the, I guess, some of the reasons of why we all really feel so passionately about hormone health and well-being. And I think from the podcast perspective, Bianca, why we felt it was really important.
And I think the beautiful thing in that is this is all about how do we start that conversation? It's by having a conversation. There is so much power in storytelling. And, I don't know if anyone on here has had, that thing in your life, and it could be hormone based or it could be non-hormone based. And you've been through this thing. And when you start talking about it and you hear other people that have been through something similar, and you just feel that lift of, oh, there is someone else going through this, and you find that connection. There is so much power in storytelling. So absolutely do ask all the questions, do get involved, start that conversation. And this is a completely judgment free space where you can say how you feel, and we will hold that space for you. And I'm sure all the Hormones on the Blink ladies would agree with that.
Yeah, thank you, Bianca. And that, if you can all see can you all see the screen okay there? You can all see that. Yeah, so when we think about hormone health, we think about menopause, we sometimes perhaps we think about a certain age group, don't we? We think about, well, menopause, perhaps we don't have to think about that till we're in our 50s. But actually menopause, perimenopause can start mid to late 30s, early 40s as an average. And when we think about the fact that, women in the workplace we make up 51% of the population, and we make up almost half of the over 50 workforce. Then when we think about hormone health imbalances like PCOS, well, they say it's 1 in 10 are affected. Endometriosis, 10%. Now we'll take these statistics lightly and we'll come back to why we take them a bit lightly, but that's just to kind of have that on our radar. Bianca, stats around PMDD. I'm sure you kind of know these off the top of your head, but how, in terms of people that are impacted, it's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think with PMDD, it's something that's been it's becoming a lot more common over the last couple of years. It's something that wasn't hugely looked into. So you'll find, probably 2 or 3 years ago, you go to the doctors and actually they weren't, unless you're specialised in that field, like Dr. Katie,
Yeah.
then they were kind of a bit like, oh, not too sure. Whereas you go into the doctors now, you go on to, even the simple things as logging, buying insurance, life insurance, and it's listed as a condition. It's becoming a lot more spoken about. It's becoming a lot more common. It is, PMDD is well and truly out there, which is great. I think one of the things for PMDD that sticks out for me is that 46% of people with ADHD have PMDD.
Yeah.
So there is a huge link, because there's so much of it is to do with that brain chemistry and that change and the intensity of emotions. So there's so many similarities there, and things that you'll get side effects like the overwhelm and the anger, that will come with PMDD and ADHD. So there's a lot of similarities there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I just say, someone just asked what is PCOS
Yeah, I saw that.
and PMDD in the questions,
Yes.
and PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, characterized by follicles on the ovaries, and can give hormonal change. So sometimes things like irregular periods, hair growth, excess weight, and acne. PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder. So it's a form of PMS, but it's much more severe. It's usually characterized by symptoms in the days before a period, often emotional symptoms. Some women get sort of suicidal thoughts. So it's kind of very significant impact on the quality of someone's life every single time they lead up to their period.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And again, what we'll do is we'll send around some links after today. So if you do want to have a read any more about polycystic ovarian syndrome, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, endometriosis, or anything that we talked about today, you'll be able to do that. And the reason, obviously, and then on top of that, we've also got people that might be going through fertility treatments, who will be impacted by that process and the kind of the huge amount of hormones that they have to kind of take and have. So when we look at all of these different health conditions, these different hormone health conditions, actually it can impact a really wide and a very large number of people in the workplace. And the difficulty is, as Bianca's touched on it, for example, with endometriosis, the average time they say it takes to get diagnosed is 7.5 years. 7.5 years of people's lives. A lot of them have had to give up their work because of it. It impacts their personal lives. And the same with, with PMDD and with other conditions. If people aren't able to recognise what is wrong, if the GP is not able to recognise what is wrong, all of this is having a large impact. So the goal behind Hormones on the Blink and behind the podcast is to raise awareness, is to have those conversations of where people maybe listen to that and go, do you know what, that I can really relate to that. Maybe I need to go and see my GP, and get some support. I'm just keeping an eye on the chat. Yeah, thank you, Jade. If everyone's not talking, if you're able to put yourself on mute, if that's okay, just because we pick up some of the background chat. There we go. Brilliant. Okay. And this is a quote from Bianca. So this is in our very first podcast that's just come out. She says, Bianca, this is what you said, isn't it? I'm so glad I found the tools and I got my diagnosis and started tracking my cycles, which has been a game changer. That's what we want that's why we want to raise this awareness. A survey done by Dr. Louise Newson, so 3,000 women, 59% of those women took time off of work. Only 5% had menopause on their sick note. So there's a lot of questions in there, but some of those questions might be, does that individual know what they're going through? Do they know that they're in perimenopause and menopause? If they don't, does the GP know? Or actually, do they feel more comfortable saying that it's a mental health, because that's very often what's on the sick note instead is anxiety and depression? Do they feel more comfortable putting that down because they feel that's more supported in their workplace rather than a menopause or perimenopause issue? Bianca, I know you touched on this, and I think Dr. Katie. So 72% of people with PMDD report thoughts of suicide at some point in their lives, which is far greater than the average. So from a mental health perspective, from a supporting each other, from a supporting people in the workplace, the benefits of knowing about this. And then I find this is a really interesting statistic, so between 45 and 49, when divorce rates are at their highest. So if we take this into account, we can't put it all down to perimenopause and menopause, for sure we can't. But if we think about how many more relationships would benefit from both parties having more understanding and awareness. So it really is from a personal, a mental health, a workplace, a relationship, a family perspective that why all of this awareness is so important. So what we're going to do now is we're going to come to Bianca, because Bianca's very kindly given up some of her time today. She's away, but she's joined us. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for the moment and come to Bianca, and just want to ask you, Bianca, about your experience of PMDD. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Can everyone hear me okay, first of all? Because I'm in a bar and it's quite loud. So just kind of working with what I've got. But yeah, so I'd actually taken the pill for most of, so starting from my teenage years, which is very common for a lot of women, take the pill until I got to my late 20s, and I starting to have a bit more of a knowledge, a bit more of awareness, a bit more of a want to look after my own well-being. I also manage a mental health and wellbeing nonprofit in the Portsmouth area. And so I thought, I want to come off the pill. I don't want to be taken, but I don't need to take the pill, and that was probably when I was about 27. And then these next years felt like this is the thing, I wasn't tracking at that time. So I felt like all I was doing was crying. All I was doing was being angry. I felt like I was an angry person. But actually, then I thought, I need to understand this. So I started tracking my cycles flow. And I know you just put that quote up, Sophie. I will forever go on to everyone about the need to track your cycles. I don't know, as a female, how I didn't track my cycles before, when I started tracking them in my late 20s. When I had a look at the ebbs and flows of my cycle, I realized actually I wasn't crying all the time. I was crying for 1 week, for about 4 days of that 1 week, every month. At the same time, every month. At the same time, I was angry every month. At the same time, I was crying. At the same time, I just couldn't. Everything it almost felt like I wasn't me. I was someone else. And it honestly felt like I was a completely different person. And they talk a lot online about this very, very significant difference from that last day of your cycle until your first day of your cycle, to when you bleed. And I could honestly, it was like waking up and I was just me again. Even to the point that my family members and friends around me would be like, I'd wake up, hi, you're right. And they're like, whoa, you were not this person yesterday. It's like, it is a clear difference. So I was really, I try and understand what is going on. And then I found out about PMDD and I thought, wow, I've got this. I've 100% got this. I was very lucky in the fact that I had healthcare cover with one of my corporate companies that I used to work with. So I went and got private healthcare through Spire. And again, very lucky, because although I shouldn't have to say lucky, because it shouldn't be a struggle to get a diagnosis, you know. But I went to the doctor. This doctor at Spire, he said, you know what, my daughter's got the same thing. So I know exactly what you're talking about. I know exactly what you've got, PMDD. It's managed with hormones, you know, people manage it in different ways. Yes, there is ways to manage it. And I do talk about doing everything very holistically. Look at your diet, it has an effect. If you drink alcohol, you know, day in, day out, that's not going to help your symptoms with, you know, whether it's PMDD, menopause, perimenopause, or whatever it is. But for me, it got to the point where, you know, from the girl that was like, oh, I don't want to be on anything, to I will take anything that you offer me because I need to stop feeling like this. Dr. Katie mentioned the suicidal thoughts. So there were times where I was very, very suicidal, which was horrific because, you know, you question, why is this happening to me? Got diagnosed, was sent into hospital to be put under, to be fitted with the coil, and they wanted to take some biopsies just to be on the safe side. So I was very well looked after. But I think what helped that was the fact that me and Sophie talk about getting everything together. So I had my flow report, you know, this is my cycles, this is what they're doing. I've tracked this for over a year now. I've read this, I've read up on this. This is what I understand. You've almost got to build that case. You know, we always say, don't we, Sophie, the doctors have 10, 15 minutes to understand what's wrong with you. And if you go in and go, well, I feel a bit angry and I cry sometimes. And they've got that two pieces of information and then I'm like, oh, okay. Now I've got to work out what's wrong with you in 10 to 15 minutes, you know. But if you can come in and you build that case and you've got all of the information and you've done your own research, that's going to be a lot easier for the process. It's going to be less overwhelming for you. And it's just going to make the whole process a lot easier. So that's what kind of really helped me at that time. So I've come out of hospital, I've got the coil in. I'll be honest, it took a while for it to settle, but it's a hormone. It's an object going into your body. Of course, it's, you know, when I look back and I think, well, of course it's going to take time to settle, but it wasn't enjoyable. And I think in those times you've just got to find your support network, you know, like the people in this chat, and talk to other people, understand other people's stories, you know, keep people close, safe people that you can talk to about this. I could phone Sophie and go, Sophie, I literally feel like I want to just climb back into bed. I can't stop crying, you know, and Sophie gets it. She gets it. If I find people like that, that's been a lifesaver. And I guess it's just been a journey from then, really. This was about 2 years ago now, and things that have really helped me. Alcohol is not my friend. I don't drink. Food, I have to manage what I eat. The more sugar I eat, the more my symptoms might play havoc in my life. And stress. Stress really exacerbates your symptoms. So if your body is focused on your fight and flight and helping keep you safe and keep you alive, you know, it's your sex hormones over here, they're going to be just put to the back burner. Let's not worry about that for now because we're literally trying to keep you safe and alive. So of course it's going to play havoc. So, you know, for me, my symptoms and managing them have been absolutely fantastic the last 8 months until I moved out of my flat last month. And it was horrific. And there were tears. And I even drove my car into the pavement. That's probably how worse my symptoms have got. The rage came out. I got in my car. I didn't time it. And I drove into the pavement. So that's probably as bad as I'm hoping it's going to get. But overly, you know, speaking as a whole, I think I've really learned how to manage it now because I have an understanding, because I have that knowledge. And magnesium is definitely my best friend.
Awesome.
That stuff is great.
Thank you, Bianca. That's brilliant. So I think you've given a really great insight there in terms of what it's like to have PMD and what's helped you with that. And now obviously you do training in the workplace as well, don't and bring that into it. So that's great. So if anyone's got any questions for Bianca, Bianca is dashing off now, but if anyone's got any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. She'll also be contactable. Our contact details will be in those emails as well. So thank you, Amanda. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you to Bianca.
No, that's okay. I hope you ladies enjoy the rest of the session. I will put in my personal Instagram as well because I talk a lot about PMDD on there. So I'll leave you with that, and then I will I'll scooch off. But please send me the recording because I'd love to hear the rest of the stories.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks, Bianca.
Enjoy. See you all.
Okay, see
Bye.
you all. Bye. And we've
I've just
got
seen a question about magnesium. I don't know whether you want me to answer that one or to come
no,
back
no,
to
that's we'll come back to that. But
that.
thank you. Thanks, Katie. So we're moving on now to Roz. So Roz is going to share. We're very grateful to Roz joining us today because she's had well, just life. Just we won't go into, just life sometimes is a challenge, isn't it? But Roz is joining us. So Roz is one of our trainers, our workplace trainers. And Roz went through surgical menopause at a young age, and there wasn't much help back then. So, Roz, do you want to tell us a bit about how your symptoms impacted you?
Um, my symptoms, quite bizarrely, I don't really remember because the first thing I knew about what was wrong with me was when I had a ruptured ovarian cyst 6 months after my daughter was born. My periods had always been horrendous, chronic pain. It was renowned that I would have a day off work or two. I just felt absolutely horrendous. And it transpired that every month I was developing these huge cysts on my ovaries. And of course, they would disappear, come back again the next month. And so we went on. Anyway, had my daughter in February 1988. October 1988, walking through the streets of Brighton, excruciating pain, doubled over, didn't know what to do. Managed to get myself home with baby, lay on the bed with baby, and thought, I don't know what's going to happen. Anyway, my other half arrived. I rang the doctors, who then rang an ambulance. I had a ruptured ovarian cyst. This kept happening even after the surgery. I had surgery to help clear that up. I then had a second surgery to clear up another one. And eventually I had to say to them, look, where do we go from here? I can't go through this going into hospital every 6 months. Feeling lousy, not knowing what I'm doing. I had a young family. So they said the only answer is to have a hysterectomy. But we don't quite know what to do because you're very young. I was 31. And this was 36 years ago. And so ultimately, the decision was made that I would have a hysterectomy. The person that performed the hysterectomy left my ovaries in. So the key thing that was causing the problem was still with me when I came round from the hysterectomy. Same symptoms, same scenario every month. I mean, I cannot tell you the rage that I had. And being, as I was then, a single mum as well, it was even worse. So precisely a year to the day, I went back into hospital to have my ovaries removed. I instantly went through, yes, menopause. I'd had a year of having period symptoms and everything else, but no periods. And now, well, let's give you a full-blown menopause at the same time. I said yes to HRT because I didn't know any different. As far as I was concerned, HRT was the answer to my prayers. But what I then had was breast cancer. Back 30 years ago, HRT, breast cancer, the two didn't go together, so they instantly stopped it. I had all my treatment and I was very, very lucky. I had some lumps that were removed, I had some chemo, I had radiotherapy, and that was it. And I was very, very fortunate. But I was on my own with regard to menopausal symptoms, HRT, where I went, what I did. Nobody knew. Nobody actually even gave me any advice. So I fumbled around in the dark, and I was on a journey in amongst a career, which I was also doing at the same time, of looking at holistic therapies anyway, because I'd always had a tendency to look at alternatives. And I was very, very fortunate to bump into people that had some ideas with regard to vitamin supplements, diet, etc., the alternative menopause. And that did help. But I then found Chinese medicine. And that's going to sound very, very odd to some people because unless you've actually looked at it, Chinese medicine can be a bit of a mystery. But Chinese medicine was actually my saviour. I had it for about 2 years. This beautiful Chinese lady in Brighton who helped me hugely. It was a bit like drinking mud because it was a brown powder and you had to mix it with water, cold water. And if you might not know, mud and water, dust and water don't really mix very well. So there were always lumps in them. It tasted disgusting, but it put all the symptoms away. I didn't have any hot flushes. I didn't have any motion. They all gradually disappeared.
I think that's wonderful. That's just for anyone that's on here where there's a comment in the Caroline's mentioned you've been through some horrible stuff. The fact that you're still here and talking to us is amazing. What an incredible person.
Thank you.
So, yeah. And I think that what you've been through, Ros, and the fact that you know, had to find alternative remedies, and you did find those and they helped. Because not everybody, like you mentioned, they might find actually that they're going through breast cancer, or they're told for whatever reason that HRT is not for them, or they don't want it. And to know actually there are other ways of managing. So from a like a workplace perspective, what support would you have, what support would have helped you going through that at the time?
Knowing that there are other alternatives to HRT. I would never say to anybody, don't go on HRT. But if you physically can't, there are lots and lots of different, there are options. But all I would say to you is please look at the options, because I didn't get the best advice and I'm also now osteopenic. So I am concerned about the fact that I am heading that way. But there are things that you can do to protect your bones, and you learn what to do about it. And it's never too late.
No.
Never too late to turn around and say, I can't do that. It's too late. I don't want to worry about that. Move on. You need to do it, and do it now. I mean, I really, really I found out a lot more since I started working with you. Found out a lot more about the cardio side and the benefits of all of that comes through HRT and what you need to do. But I've learned from that and explained it as well. And I think get clarity from professional advice certainly helps.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ros. And so Ros does workplace training as well. So, you know, particularly if you would like somebody to talk on those topics, you know, to perhaps reach out and make people feel heard that might be going through, you know, early menopause or hysterectomy or breast cancer treatments. And Ros also herself is a back flower remedy practitioner, so is able to support people in that way as well. So big thank you to you, Ros. Anyone got any questions for Ros, stick them in the chat, but her contact details will also be sent round as well today for anybody that would like to have a chat further. We come on to Kathy. So Kathy is joining us all the way from Cyprus. Hello, Kathy.
Hi.
So Kathy again, so she's a trainer out in Cyprus. Do you want to tell us a bit, Kathy, about your experience and how your symptoms have impacted you?
Yeah. So I went through an early menopause before the age of 40. I suspect I was probably in perimenopause from my 30s, because before I'd had my child, I had stress incontinence, and I'd seen my gynecologist for that because it was really worrying for me that I had stress incontinence at such a young age, pregnancy. And I didn't get any, she wasn't curious about this. She didn't really want to find out why. She just said, well, it is what it is. That's just how you are. And also this was making me have a lot of infections, how do you call them, urinary tract infections as well. Then I managed to get pregnant even though I wasn't having a cycle, so I wasn't getting a period for months, and I would go back and forth to my endocrinologist, mostly, not so much my gynecologist, but my endo, because I was also exhausted all the time. And I said to him, it can't be normal for a woman in her 30s to be this exhausted. But they couldn't pinpoint anything. My FSH was more or less okay. It was a bit on the high side, but not so much. I managed to get pregnant accidentally, but very happily. And I think that the pregnancy really helped me for a few years get to my, to my late 30s. But a year after I had given birth, everything kind of started crashing down again. So, I wasn't breastfeeding as much. I think my body was starting to catch on that actually I am nearing 40, I'm getting old. And I started having the same problems, but the doctors would say it's because you're breastfeeding. So they blamed everything on me breastfeeding. But I knew my body and I knew something wasn't right. I also almost made myself diabetic. So I went in for, a normal blood test panel, and they called me the next morning and said, you have to come in ASAP because you're going to make yourself diabetic and you need to go on a very strict diet. And I still wasn't diagnosed as menopausal. This was before everything, but for me now, it was a really big red flag that my body wasn't responding to anything. And I was telling them that I had these massive sugar cravings. It was all I wanted to eat all day was sugar. So I pushed for the FSH and LH. We did that over about a 4-month period, and my FSH went it's probably in the 30s to over 120, I think, or towards 150, which was really, really high. And they my endocrinologist said, okay, you're menopausal, and you can go. FSH is the follicular stimulating hormone. So I was offered HRT, or they weren't really concerned. I had a child, so they said if you have a child, maybe you don't need a period again. Maybe you just need to not sort it out, which was very upsetting because it's not about not having a period or having children or not having children. It's about feeling okay within yourself. It's about wanting to be with your child, to take care of your child. And at that point, I could barely look after him because I couldn't get up off the couch. So I was just about surviving and managing to, do the basic things that a mother can do, which is bathe him, take him to school, make sure he's fed. But I couldn't play with him. I couldn't lift him up because my joints were painful. So a lot of things I couldn't actually do. And I started HRT, and that's how I started my organization here in Cyprus. And that's why I want to train on menopause, because I think it's lacking, especially for young women and especially for women who are a bit older. I think we're having children older. So that's a really important intersection for me, that we're having children much older and we're not understanding postpartum symptoms and menopause symptoms, or the two cross over. And then we're left kind of not knowing what to do with ourselves and with young children.
Absolutely. I thank you for sharing that, Kathy. I think it just sounds like it must have been a real struggle and a fight to almost like, and you hear that, don't you, from lots of people, is that they say it's put down to other things, whether it's pregnancy or other reasons. So
Yeah.
I think it's really important to share your experience and your story so that there might be other people on the call today that are relating to that. And in terms of the support that you offer, Kathy, tell us a bit about that. So training, workplace training.
Workplace training, definitely. Like I support women on on my WhatsApp. I've created a Viber community recently. I'm trying to set up a monthly meetup. I also advocate, so I've been to Parliament here. I'm launching a survey with a UK doctor. So we've written the survey. We're waiting for it to be approved by the bioethics to understand what women in Cyprus know about menopause. So this is important for us to get statistics. We don't have statistics. We haven't got many European statistics. We also won a key action to Erasmus project with the EU. It's a very small project, but we're hoping that will create a big project where we can go with a white paper to Parliament in the EU and change policy around how they are dealing with menopause and menstruation in the workplace. I support as much as I can on the phone as well. And the Viber community for me was a way to directly kind of send information out rather than keep sending out information to one woman at a time. And men, because men have joined. I have a lot of men who are very worried about their relationship with their wives. They're not having, sex is a really big issue. Libido is a really big issue with them. And a lot of women are coming about that as well. So it's something that I'm trying to kind of cover and offer support for.
Amazing. You're doing incredible work out there, Kathy. Thank you so much. And Tracy's mentioned in the comments, she said, I can imagine that her life might have taken a different path if she'd have known the symptoms that she was having might have been linked to her hormones. Unfortunately, she started gathering labels like depression, anxiety, stress, fatigue, then ME, fibromyalgia, etc., etc. And again, it's not an uncommon story. So thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you, Kathy. So now we're going to move on to Laura. So thank you for joining us today, Laura. Laura is a employment law and HR specialist, so we really wanted to kind of ask you, what's your experience in terms of menopause and hormone health challenges that come up, whether it's for kind of employees and organisations or for those organisations themselves, for businesses?
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. Just to give you an overview, Sophie and I have been working together, gosh, for a few years now, haven't we? I think it's about 2 or 3 years, and really love the journey that Sophie's taken Hormones on the Blink with. So really great to be part of that. Our conversation sort of started about having extremely heavy periods after I had my son, where I just could not stop. I thought I was going to end up being on iron tablets. I was told I was losing a lot of blood. It was affecting everything. I couldn't go on holiday. It was just, I felt like I was wearing sanitary towels the whole time. And I didn't know what was wrong with me. I didn't have a clue. I just thought I'd had my second child that I'd had later in life, because we didn't fall pregnant for probably about 5 years. The gap is between my son and my daughter. Fell really quickly with her. Never really had any problems, if I'm honest. I was very fortunate. Some of you ladies, that your stories that I'm hearing is just horrendous for you guys. So, my thoughts go out to you for your journeys. But it was that lack of knowledge. And I went and saw my GP and I said, I don't know what's wrong with me. No one had said I needed to track things. No one had said I needed to do anything. It was just a case of, constantly buying sanitary towels and hoping that your underwear wouldn't get messed and show through, which again, you see this quite a lot. And I love these posts, the fact that there are more women sharing about this. It's just, we're still made to feel uncomfortable and guilty if those sorts of things happen to us. I then had the coil fitted. That was after probably about 2 years of going through this sort of hellhole. That's the only way to explain it. That was amazing. And I know Bianca mentioned earlier about her experience and how it sort of affected her. And gosh, yeah, what a different hormone. I was eating celery and walnuts pretty much all the time. It was bizarre. So yeah, that was sort of my experience and how it went through. Doesn't stop the impact of the menopause. I would probably say I'm perimenopause. I'm going right through it. It is horrendous. And Ros has mentioned alternatives, which I've turned to. I haven't looked at HRT because again, less information, and talking to Sophie has really helped that. So yeah, it's a real journey that a lot of us as women go through, and almost like Ross was saying, sometimes you feel quite alone because you just don't feel that you've got the backs of the profession. I've got private health insurance now for those reasons, because again, I don't necessarily get the support from the surgery that I go to, and can't get an appointment. So yeah, it makes it really hard. So yeah, that's sort of my background of coming into this. But that's not to say that there isn't the help there. We have it quite a lot in employment. A lot of employees come to us about certain situations that they've been involved in. One I've got with a big retail company at the moment, where she wasn't allowed to go to the toilet and have toilet breaks. She was going through quite significant trauma from COVID, and she was suffering with mental health and depression. So there were huge levels of exposure for her as an employee. All her managers were male, and none of them gave her the time of day. The whole of the minutes of the meetings that we've had so far have just been, really poor. And they have this beautiful policy in the company that says how they support their workforce, how they give them the tools that they need. And it's just complete nonsense because they're not putting it into practice. And I think, some of the things that we talk about is how can it support people in the workplace? And it's about having that conversation. It's about being able to have those doors open without feeling intimidated that you can't speak to anybody. I think realistically, a lot of us feel that it's always been a non-discussion. Ros, you probably know, and my mum's the same, with that it wasn't talked about. It wasn't something that people would air in open forums like we are today. So they feel like it's a real no to even say that they're hot. And there's jokes, there's people make jokes about, oh, look, so-and-so's got the fan on again and she must be having one of her flushes, and don't actually really appreciate the things that a lot of women have to go through, as well as the statistics that Sophie's given us about the divorce rates. And my family lawyer connections that I work with are incredibly busy. And interestingly, now that you've told me that with the stats, they're probably quite high in that sector of who they're reaching out to and supporting with divorces. And I just think, again, it's about making sure that you get the right support. We talk about the appropriate training. We also talk about dealing with neurodiversity, because ultimately we've mentioned about ADHD today. We've also mentioned there are its impacts on autism. We do quite a lot of training of neurodiversity in the workplace. So again, it's about raising that awareness, giving those people flexible working opportunities, allowing them to either work late or come in early or however it suits, but feeling that they can come to you and have those conversations as reasonable employers. I've got a lot of clients who, again, have that open door policy, and it's okay to not be okay. And it's giving that supportive environment, but also making sure that there are, the wellness programs, and encouraging them to approach you. From my perspective with HR, and legal side of things, it is about policy, but having a lovely policy is wonderful, but actually making sure that all your staff are trained and aware of it and what they should and shouldn't be doing, and being mindful, but also making sure that there are the support frameworks, because obviously we have issues of whether the menopause amounts to a disability under the Equality Act. And therefore we consider it to be a protected disclosure. So therefore you have to make sure that you put support in place. So the Labour government is obviously proposing more measures on this, which, hooray, really pleased about. They've introduced a menopause action plan, and they're including policies on flexible working, paid leave. This is going to be for the larger employers. Doesn't mean to say that small employers can't look into it as well. And Rachel Hopkins announced that they also plans to introduce guidelines to the smaller business at some point to provide structured support. So I'm pleased that we are going through legislation.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. Some positive news in there, isn't it? Always good to have positive news. And Laura, just a bit about, thank you so much for sharing your personal experience. And there's been lots of comments in the chat. I don't know if you can see them, but kind of thank you for sharing your experience and what you've gone through, and people relating to that. But in terms of your services and how you're able to support both kind of individuals and employees, do you want to just briefly tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so we provide sort of training for employers through the workplace to raise awareness on menopause, and making sure that employers are approaching it in the right way, and dealing with matters so that they are having that, I call it the open door policy, a feeling somewhere that they have a place to speak about it. Yeah. It's also about discussing with employers about where they need to go next, or if they haven't even started, where can they start? So we can assist them with that step-by-step process too.
So things like putting policies in place and then embedding it down into the organisation, but also if somebody feels that they've been, let's say they've left work and they've been wrongly dismissed, or there's been an incident where they feel they've not been treated in the right way, and sometimes that happens in hindsight, doesn't it? Of they realise afterwards, oh my goodness, that was a really awful time and there's no way they should have treated me like that. You can support those people, can't you, if they want to take it further?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, there's never a silly question, or never a silly response. I think, some people aren't aware that sadly, some people have to act fast because the tribunal claims are 3 months after the date of dismissal. less a day. So it's quite a fast track process. So I would always say, don't delay, get advice today.
I like that. And that's a great one-liner to leave on. Thank you, Laura. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Okay, so now we come on to Dr. Katie Hodgkinson. Dr. Katie, thank you again for joining us today. So we want to ask you really about why can people's hormonal changes, why can they have such a big impact on someone's well-being? And I know that's a whopping question to ask you, but yeah, what are some of the reasons behind that?
Thank you, Sophie. So hormones are a complex thing and they don't just work on their own. It's a big cascade of events that can happen. So one hormone can knock on impact on another, and it's a very fine, intricate balance. So if one hormone is out of balance, it can impact on other hormones, and there are hormone receptors on virtually every cell on the body. So, for example, estrogen is a very powerful hormone, and it can impact on loads of different systems. Not only that, we know that hormones can impact on neurotransmitters, serotonin, GABA, dopamine, those feel-good neurotransmitters. And those neurotransmitters can impact on our mood, on our sleep, or on our energy. We know that lots of things can affect hormones, so things like stress, the foods we're eating, not getting enough sleep, gut health, estrogen metabolism issues can play a role, and that can impact on things like ovarian cysts, breast cysts, heavy periods, the balance between estrogen and progesterone. We know that thyroid is very closely linked as well. So, for example, those changes in hormones in the perimenopause can impact on thyroid function and vice versa. Vitamin D is a hormone. It impacts on other hormones as well. Our blood sugar balance can play an important role. So if our blood sugar is sort of fluctuating, that can impact on our stress, on our sleep, on our other hormones. So it's a very, very delicate balance. And there are a lot of external factors playing a role. So diet, lifestyle is really, really important.
So coming on to that in terms of like how people support themselves. So I think what you said there is great because that's really people can see. We just sometimes think about them in isolation, and actually that's not how the hormones function today. It's not how our body works. But those tips on people that want to support their own kind of hormonal well-being, whether they're in perimenopause, menopause, whether they're in the 20s, whether they've got premenstrual dysphoric disorder or whatever that looks like, there are some very almost generic things, basic things that we can all do, aren't there, which you're a real kind of advocate for. So yeah, tell us about those, Katie. What do some of those things look like?
Yes, absolutely. So whereas there are some specific advice depending on what your problem is, as I mentioned, the stress, the blood sugar balance, getting the sleep. So making sure you're eating healthily, avoid those sugary foods, the processed foods. Try not to skip too many meals. Don't eat too close to bedtime. Getting a regular sleep routine. I know it's very, very difficult because sleep can be affected by hormones, but managing your stress. So talking to someone, meditation, mindfulness, and also being aware about your symptoms. As Bianca said, charting your symptoms is so, so important because it can be very difficult to know exactly if your hormones are playing a role. Look for other factors that could be playing a role. We can't put everything down to hormones. So I get a blood test in virtually every patient to, things like thyroid, low iron, B12, folate, for example. Those can play a role. Knowledge is power. So do your research, read about HRT if that's indicated, read about what could be causing your symptoms, chart them, be prepared if you are then going to see your doctor. In the NHS, it's only 10-minute appointments, sometimes a bit longer, but it can feel quite rushed and difficult to get your point across. And yes, there is sometimes a reason for antidepressants, but if your hormones are playing a role, exploring the hormones and that side of things, and if you're perimenopausal, could HRT be something worthwhile exploring? So yeah, there are lots of other things which can play a role, but it's a generic principles is blood sugar balance, managing your stress, getting your sleep good, being aware about your symptoms and getting that background knowledge.
Yeah, wonderful. There's a real range of things there that we can all do. But yeah, that knowledge is power is so important, isn't it? Because then we know, okay, where I need to go, with this, and what are the things that I can do to help myself. In terms of the support that you offer, Dr. Katie, do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so I'm also a lifestyle medicine doctor as well as a GP. My business is Hampshire Health and Hormones. It's a holistic approach. It's not, it's looking at that person as a whole, looking at all the different factors playing a role. It's a sort of integrative approach. So it's knowledge about different pathways which can play a role with symptoms. Most of my consultations are video consultations. If anyone would like face-to-face, I do offer at the Spire Hospital in Southampton. And if you just want a discovery call, just to chat about what I do. So I do offer a free discovery call just to sort of go into more detail about what I offer and whether I could be of any help for you.
That's wonderful, thank you. And that, I think that's one of the things that I really love about you, Dr. Katie, is that fact that you take into account looking at all of the potential deficiencies that might be going on and the lifestyle factors. And then what the options are in terms of treatment. And it's always about, well, the individual's kind of choice in that, isn't it? But also, I think what's helpful for some people to know potentially is that somebody could come and see you, couldn't they? And you could delve into what the issues are. And if there is any medication or HRT that might be indicated, that's something then there can be, those notes can be shared with their GP, can't they? So that, yeah. So they can then potentially get that on the NHS rather than having to pay for it on an ongoing basis privately. And I think that's really helpful for people to know.
Definitely. So it's absolutely keeping the GP in the loop, asking if they could prescribe HRT ongoing if I've started it. So it's not just me saying you've got to keep seeing me forever. Absolutely not. It's getting people to a point where they feel that they can manage their care ongoing through the NHS if they would like to. So
yeah. Great, thank you so much. So again, we'll share Dr. Katie's details with you today. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop sharing my, no, I'm not sharing my screen. I'm going to stop recording now.